Thanks so much for joining us. This is Tally Han from Oak Park Friends School, and we are here to talk about our new K-1 program starting in the school year 2024-25. So thank you for joining us. A little about who I am. I'm Tally Han, the founder of OPFS, which started in 2007 in my house. I have a background in education with a bachelor's from Northwestern, and then a master's in special education as well as early ed administration. And I have taught everything from university all the way down to early childhood, with the exception of these wonderful grades. I also have three kids, excuse me, 23, 20, and 17-year-old who've all gone through the district in Oak Park. And we had a lovely experience, but we are excited to provide a continuum from the education that we're experiencing now with our ECE program at OPFS. When I was teaching high school, one of the things that I was able to do in that high school was recognize the needs of the kids I was working with who weren't being served in that alternative setting already, and develop a program within that program to serve their needs that was accredited by CPS and approved by the school that I was working for at the time. So being able to respond to the needs of the kids that I see in front of me is a passion of mine and something that I work every day to do. And so that is the heart of where this came from. And then Katie Quackenbush and Paige Lipsy jumped on board and helped flush out the program that we're going to talk about today. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Katie so she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Tally. I'm Katie Quackenbush. I am currently a pre-K teacher here at Oak Park Friends. I've been here about a year, but I do have about 10 years of teaching experience in ECE, both in the classroom and working on the administrative side of things. I have a bachelor's in elementary education along with a minor in reading, and I'm also credentialed as a developmental therapist through early intervention. So I, like Tally said, I kind of jumped on board with Tally and Paige to flesh out this program just from the need of seeing how special it is here at OPFS and wanting to extend these learning experiences for kiddos as they get older.
Hi, I am Paige Lipsy. I have been with OPFS for the past 8, almost 9 years. I have my master's in early childhood education. I have taught kindergarten here at OPFS during COVID, and I really had a passion for early childhood. I feel I just relate, and I also have my yoga certificate for early childhood specifically, and I feel like I take a very holistic approach to helping guide youth. So a little behind why I felt so passionate about this, as I began to register my own daughter, who is in Miss Katie's classroom for kindergarten, I felt very disheartened when I began signing waivers. I was very taken back with the amount of technology, and even as a parent, that fell on me to be responsible to ensure she wasn't coming across things that were inappropriate for her age, which is a very scary thought. It's also very scary to think that she'll be sitting on an iPad for the majority of her 5-year-old age, her last couple of years of being a kid, to really enjoy, and just the magic of OPFS has given her, for that to be slightly taken away. So I felt honored to be alongside Katie and Tally to really develop this program, and I'm so excited for it. So our why. So as you can see, there's so many benefits to a smaller teacher to student ratio, as I'm sure you guys know. It provides a more personalized instruction for your child. It is less noisy and less disruptive. And as an adult, I have ADHD. I struggle with that myself. And to imagine being in a smaller classroom with a lot of children and not having the smaller teacher to student ratio, I would struggle with that. So I can only imagine for these small little kids. The increased interaction between teacher and students, smaller, a more personalized learning experience. There's just so many pros that come with having a smaller teacher to student ratio. So there's just a few of the benefits of having a smaller classroom.
Yeah, and I will jump in there really quickly and just say, why now is a good question as well. And so, like Paige had mentioned, she's got a little one who is a 4 or 5 going into kindergarten, and all of her thoughts. We also did kindergarten, as Paige mentioned previously at OPFS, as a response to the COVID lockdown kind of that the schools were going through. And we, as an administrator, I had a really hard time at that point sending kids that were coming from a play-based education with us into what I knew was going to be a fully online, at least beginning of the school year. So Paige and Matt, who also teaches for us now, jumped in and were able to provide an in-person kindergarten at that time, not because D97 now has something that we don't want our kids to experience. But one of the things that is really important to us is that we have what's called the sticky learning with kids. So the more they experience it, the more they have hands-on. And you'll see this as we go through how our program is designed. It is important for kids to have learning in their hands so that it can be in their heads and in their hearts. And a lot of what happens when they leave us and go into the district is that teachers who are wonderful have this burden of all the other expectations that are outside of the classroom placed on them, that they can't respond to the kid in front of them because they have to check all these other boxes. And so we're hoping to be able to eliminate that burden for the teachers that would be part of this program so that they can spend this time with kids. And it's really important these first three years really in the elementary education is still considered early childhood. And so that's really important for parents to understand, is that even though they're going to what we would consider more formalized education, this time they are still developing all of those important things that are baseline for education, such as executive functioning skills, attending to tasks, working in a group. Group work, we know as adults, is the way the world works these days, and they need to be able to learn these at a very young age. And it can be taught naturally and fluidly through play. And so, though we live in a really great district, we also want to be able to respond to the fact that kids learn differently. And so the district is set up for the majority of the kids to be able to flow through and be okay, quote unquote. And then we have the kids who just don't fit that mold, and they need some more handholding and some more time to be able to be kids, to be able to develop into that time of early childhood and be ready for formalized education. And so that's really our other underlying why now, because we have the space and we want to be able to provide a seamless education for our kids when they leave us, kind of as Katie had said in another presentation, more like a zero depth pool instead of going into the deep end, right into kindergarten, that we can give them these baby steps into formalized education as they're ready for it. So we want to move on to the anchors?
Yes, please.
Okay.
When Paige, Tally, and I sat down to start building out the program, we really wanted to have a couple key things that were non-negotiable that we felt really mattered and would stick out and set our program aside from the other programs that are out there right now. So the 4 things that we all felt were really important and wanted present in the program was a family meeting, increased outdoor time, flexible small group learning, and most importantly, play. Our family meeting time will be a time that is set aside to help support our students with social emotional learning opportunities that will be hands-on and relatable to them. A lot of times what happens at this age with kiddos is they're academically ready for kindergarten, but they're not necessarily ready from a social emotional perspective, and they still need individualized support there. And so the family meeting would provide that, because we would be sharing and talking about issues that our students are currently experiencing versus going through a social emotional canned curriculum where it's maybe not as personalized to them. For increased outdoor time, just D97 does a great job of providing outside time for the kiddos, but it's chopped up in various times throughout the day, which also creates a lot of transitions, which are hard for children. So our plan would be that every day we would be going outside for an hour. Most likely we'll be going to Longfellow's Public Park, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be utilizing other outdoor areas depending on the day. And then the thing that would be really special about our program is we'll be spending Wednesday mornings at Thatcher Woods. So we would be in the woods from about 8:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. every Wednesday, and we would be bringing our learning alongside us that day. So there would be a hybrid of time for them to be exploring and moving their bodies in the woods while also learning that or realizing that learning can happen anywhere and taking our materials outside with us. And the goal is to potentially expand our forest days to add another day as the year goes on, but we'll definitely be starting with Wednesday mornings at Thatcher. Next, we have flexible small group learning. This is where the bulk of our math and literacy curriculum and program will be happening. And the way that this would look is we recognize that students learn in a fluid manner. And this means that some kiddos are going to quickly pick up on one skill, and some kiddos are going to need some support on that skill still. So working in a small group model allows the teachers in the classroom to quickly adjust and move kiddos around even that day. If there's a kiddo who's doing really well and catching on to the skill for that day, we might send them off to go and play for a little bit, recognizing that this is not what they need to sit and attend to at the time, and we will pull them back later for a more challenging skill set. Or a great way that we can also assess how much a student is understanding the content for that day is allowing them to support the other kiddos in the small group and giving them the opportunities to be the teacher. So the way that the small groups would work is it would be a teacher working with 3 to 4 students at a time for about 15-minute increments, and then rotating them through that each day, depending on the skill that we're covering that day. And then lastly, play, which this is the backbone of OPFS's philosophy that we will continue to carry into the K1 program. So students who already attend OPFS are already very comfortable with the concept of play invitations. And so we'll be ramping this up a little bit and transitioning to the language of learning invitations versus play invitations, but the concept behind it would be the same. Teachers are observing our students and seeing what their interests are and giving them the autonomy to choose what they want to do and how they want to spend their time in the classroom. And it's also helping them feel that authority that they're in charge of their learning and that their ideas matter. And as educators, we're honoring what they're curious about. We'll also have sensory tables, easels, and indoor gross motor opportunities available for them at this time.
Yeah, and I just love that about what you said at the end about the learning invitations, because for people, if you're not somebody who's familiar with the way OPFS works, these invitations are a way, and we'll look at some ideas, some examples in the next slide, I believe. But like they're ways for us to be able to respond to kids learning in the moment and what we feel they really have that curiosity for. And if you have a 4 or 5 or even 3-year-old, once they start talking, they have questions and they want to know about things, and they just have this innate curiosity about the world that often disappears as they enter formalized education. And so like one of the things I think about my oldest child, when Sammy entered D97, they were enamored with science. Like they couldn't get enough science, whether it was dinosaurs or science experiments or mixing things for potions or whatever. In D97, science is not formalized in the curriculum until 3rd grade. So even though if you have a great teacher, they may find a way to weave it through literacy and math, it wasn't a part of the curriculum. And my experience with early learning, and actually any learning, is that the more passionate the student is about a subject, the more ways we can kind of use that subject to learn other skills. So think about it from a science perspective. If you have a kiddo who's really interested in that, we can do learning invitations that would deepen their desire and their curiosity for a certain subject. At the same time, we might recognize that and be able to use that in the small group learning, because maybe we're reading about dinosaurs because that is what they're interested in. And so we're using that as a literacy tool to work through there. And so there's so many, this gives us the opportunity to respond to the curiosity that we see in the kids, where again, in a more formalized setting, they have to follow the curriculum and check those check boxes. And we're able to respond and still follow what they need to learn and how they need to learn, but by honoring the curiosity that they have.
And I'm just going to chime in as a parent, watching, like, so my daughter again is in Miss Katie's room. She's 4 turning 5 this month, and I have been with OPFS for now 8 years and watching OPFS progress into this play-based model. And I would like just to ensure for parents that are not a part of OPFS, the growth that continues to happen and the questions she asks. And she is by far not lacking, not behind. She is, if anything, like the most curious, most intuitive kid. And I truly, truly believe that that is because of OPFS. So I just want to, like, as a parent standpoint, like really ensure you that, like, I would not make any other choice if I could keep her up at OPFS until college. I would gladly keep her here. And I did my student teaching at Pritzker in the city, and the math that, like, just to entail, like, what their kindergarten was sitting down, pulling down the white screen, giving kids a workbook, and that was their math. Where here we have, they're using rocks. It's just so it's enjoyable to watch versus standing up there and saying, count your 10 frames. 10 frames.
Yeah, yes. 10 frames.
It's like they want to do it, but they want to learn these things. It's just that who wants to sit down and learn? I don't want to learn like that. They want to learn these things, but they're just like taking the lead of it. It's just so magical. So
that's so great.
Yeah.
That's so great. That's exactly what we're hoping to see. And we want to just be able to bring that magic forward,
right?
Because kids deserve that.
We all deserve it. Like, this is how we should learn as adults.
Yeah, exactly. Where are we? Flow of the day. Okay, awesome.
So piggybacking off the anchors of our program, the flow of the day just provides some more detail as to how those anchors would be applied throughout the daily program. We would have a flexible drop-off between 8 and 8:30, but then our program will promptly be starting at 8:30, and that's starting with a family meeting. And this goes back to talking about that social emotional focus for the classroom and providing a time for the kiddos to be in community and connect with each other. And we feel it's really important that the day starts like that. And it also helps us set the tone for the day for the kiddos and help them feel connected with each other and understanding that they're there to support and help each other in their learning. The bulk of our day, which this very much follows the OPFS way or philosophy, is that there will be a 2-hour uninterrupted time from 9 to 11, which will be for the learning invitations. And while those learning invitations are going on, which on the next slide will give you some concrete examples of that, this is also when teachers would be polling for small group instruction. So that way the students who are not getting their direct small group work time, they are getting to use their voice and choose how they're going to spend the majority of their day. And again, that's all about giving the power almost back to the students and letting them understand, like, their knowledge and their learning and their curiosity matters to us, and we want to honor that. Another great thing about doing it this way with the 2-hour setup and slowly pulling for small group instruction is this is decreasing the amount of transitions for the students that they have to go through in the day, which is something that public education, just because of kind of all the bureaucracy and all those things, it's just really hard to get around decreasing transitions for kiddos in public education. And transitions are still something that are really, really hard for kiddos, and it can create hiccups in their learning and frustration. And so we've set up our day honor that that's a skill that they don't completely have yet, and we want them to feel supported while they're learning it still. Then we would be doing from 11 to 12 our hour of uninterrupted outdoor time. And then we'll come back for lunch. And then I want to skip down to the 1 to 2. We're kind of joking about it. We're currently calling it a brain break. None of us are a fan of that language. So we're taking feedback on what else we could call it. But what we want to stress and have families understand, especially families who their kiddos, if they've already signed up for the after school program, whether it's with us or possibly somewhere else, understanding that this is a long day for kiddos, even a kindergartner or a first grader, and it's overstimulating. Their brains are busy. They're taking in all this information. They're trying to process it, and they just need some time to decompress. And so that's a big part of the reason we're implementing this brain break is recognizing that any human, especially children, they get overstimulated and they just need some time to themselves. So this is a time for them to get kind of cozy, do something independent, whether that's looking at a book, coloring, maybe playing a game. But we will also be using this time as a time to pull kiddos who maybe we noticed during that small group instruction were really struggling and they just need 5 minutes of one-on-one instruction. Or we had a kiddo who flew through the lesson and we don't want them feeling like, oh, well, that was boring for me because I got it right away. So honoring and pulling them aside and giving them maybe the next day's lesson or talking to them about what they are curious about so we can make sure that they're feeling challenged and excited to come back the next day because there'll be something new for them to learn. So this is also, like I said, a catch-up time for us as the teachers to make sure that everyone is going to be close to ending their day on a really positive note for them. And then we would transition into a mini whole group lesson. And the thought process behind having this mini whole group lesson while we're primarily a small group focused program is recognizing that potentially at some point in time, the kiddos are going to end up in mainstream education, and whole group learning is the bulk of what happens in mainstream education. So we want to make sure that they are ready for that, and it's a skill that they've had time to practice. So we would be doing it in more developmentally appropriate time so that they can build the stamina for the whole group learning. But while we are doing mini whole group lessons, we would also still be sticking true to our philosophy where this is going to be very hands-on, very interactive. There'll probably be a lot of science happening at this time. And also our hope is cooking too. So that way there's that real life connection to math and science and seeing how that applies in their day-to-day life. So it's applicable to them. And then we would wrap up again with another family meeting and packing up to end the day.
A few things that I want to make sure that we talk about, like that student drop off, we were really intentional about not having a set time, other than that we had a rolling time so that class starts at 8:30, but recognizing, like Katie was talking about, that transitions can be hard, and needing to get out the door. And all the different drop-offs that a family might have can be complicated. So we wanted to give parents that grace as well, that, we have that rolling time. And also, did we talk about the family meeting? I couldn't remember about how we're connecting it to the social emotional learning that's actually going on in the class as well. And how, one of the things that I think sets our program apart from what a district would be doing would be the fact that instead of a structured curriculum for social emotional, this curriculum would be a fluid curriculum responding to the things that are happening in the class. So like Katie talked about, being able to practice the whole group learning as a skill that we want the kids to learn, but not being the bulk of our program. Same for like social emotional. We want them to be in a state where they can practice skills that they may need, that the teachers on the floor are recognizing are where they're at. So whether it's sharing, whether it's being able to voice the way you feel, whether it's cool down techniques, calm down techniques, because when you get flooded, any of those things would be taught during the family meeting time, so that then they could be skills that we could then remind them of throughout the day to be practicing based on what the interactions that we're seeing that are happening throughout the day. And I think that's really unique to our program.
I was going to say, I feel like the one thing OPFS is amazing at is introducing and guiding children social emotionally. All the students in OPFS, honestly, are in Chestnut Room, could tell you every single chakra color, and I'm not lying. They could tell you which chakra color comes next, and just because that time they know what a singing bowl is. They were just really able to target them in a way that I feel like in a public school, unfortunately, just they're not able to. And I've seen a huge difference in the students. We all need it.
It's a special part of our program.
Right.
And I think the nice thing that this flow of the day really shows is that we're being true to our roots as who OPFS is, as well as what the expectations will be for the kiddos if they were to transition back into a more formalized setting. And so that's kind of or standardized setting. One of the things that we want to recognize is that right now it's a K1 program, and I think that that's really amazing. We love multi-age groups because of the learning that can happen between the ages and the sharing of knowledge. That also doesn't mean that if you have a kiddo who's excelling, that they're going to be capped at one, because one of the things that Katie talked about in the small groups is that we differentiate. So that doesn't mean we just differentiate down to kids who may be struggling, but to kids who may be excelling as well. We have that freedom to be able to say, oh, well, we need to supplement. You're all the way up, you're reading at a second grade level. Let's challenge you there. And I think the schools are starting to catch up to being able to do that. But because we would have such a low teacher-child ratio, we're going to, and not the bureaucracy of a district behind it, we can respond in the moment to things like that. And I think that's another really good benefit to a program like ours.
Yeah, and something, just listening to all this, going with that family meeting and the social emotional focus too, something that is so special about OPFS, and that is our desire and goal to carry into this program, is that OPFS is a community, and we recognize Paige is a parent, I'm a parent, Tally's a parent. Parenting is hard. My kiddo today came to school with no shirt on. But you need a support system, and the public school, the teacher just has so many students and is carrying so many things. And it's not that the teacher doesn't care and the teacher doesn't want to come alongside the parenting. It's just they have a lot going on. And that is a part of the culture in OPFS already, that we are here to support you. And that is a part of what that family meeting is. It's helping, knowing maybe you're having a struggle with your child at home, and we can create another safe space for your kiddo to work on that skill, and we're coming alongside you. So it's still, you would still feel like you're a part of a team and you're not all of a sudden parenting on your own again. So the social emotional curriculum is for all of us. And you would be able to have more of that time and ear of your teachers, and that's something that sadly kind of gets lost. And I think it's hard for a lot of families, especially leaving OPFS, where it is such a tight-knit community, and then all of a sudden you kind of lose that communication through the day, and just in general. And that would be something that we would still be striving to
That's
keep.
a huge fear of mine. That's so scary.
Yeah. Should we move on to learning experiences?
So the pictures here are examples of learning invitations that are happening currently in Chestnut Room. So Ms. Page, feel free to jump in at any time, but these are just examples of when we say from that 9 to 11 in the flow of the day that there's small group instruction and learning invitations going on. These are some of the things that the students would be engaging in. And Ms. Page can probably go into a little more detail about it, but the really cool thing that we want to make sure people note is happening is almost the multiple learning domains that are happening in these images. If you look at the mushroom picture, obviously the roots of that learning invitation is science. You see the magnifying glasses, the mushrooms, the cut up pieces for them to make observations, but there's also pencils and writing tools out and signs and books. So there's a literacy and a writing connection to that learning invitation too. So that way there's multiple modes of learning that are happening for students, because as we all know, people don't just learn in one way. So we want to make sure that we're diversifying their learning experiences.
Yeah. So what you don't see is like behind the picture. So for example, like this is like a beautiful setup, a beautiful picture, but behind the picture we have, a whole group discussion about what do we want to know about mushrooms? What do we know about mushrooms? And that also, which then fell into sunflowers, which then fell into bees, which you can see in this larger picture in the center, and which has then fallen into pollen and like nectar, and it's just like turned into this huge thing. And we've had parents like coming to us and like so and so has been asking so many questions about bees and how they pollinate, and it's just like I'm learning things. And so it's just, there's so much more, and the pictures are beautiful, but like I want you to know, like just looking at this picture, imagine how much more is going behind it, and like it's just so much. And you could see in the next picture for like it's math happening here. We still have literacy out, and we have so many interesting shapes and things that are going into these learning experiences, which I love that they're learning through experiences. Like I love that. And so yeah, it's just I mean, like it's so much is happening in these pictures. I think you can just like stare at them and just like I want this is what I want as a parent for my child. And I truly feel that like I can cry. Like when she goes to school and not being able to have this set up, because this will not be the setup, I know, it breaks my heart. So yeah.
And then follow up that.
Sorry.
Just to reiterate kind of what Paige is saying, there's so much that's going on behind the scenes of these learning invitations, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit more in the slide, but just so you know, our goal to build the staff for this program is from people who are already ingrained in the OPFS community, and these are skills that we've had to learn and we've really had to practice, of observing our students, seeing what they're interacting in, and understanding, okay, they're really curious about this. Oh, or hey, that didn't work. I wonder why, because we really thought they'd be into this, and reflecting and tweaking things. And so there's so much that goes on from the educator behind the scene, where we've really been trained and taught how to reflect and modify. So this is a different type of teaching than what teachers in mainstream education have been taught to think. So like I said, we'll dive more into it probably in a couple of slides, but our goal is to build this program with OPFS staff who already have the experience and naturally think this way.
Yeah. And really quick, talk to the picture. Like as you could see, like the students they're engulfed in what they're doing. It's not like a force, and like in that middle picture with the flower, there's a beehive, but behind the picture you see students still sitting, like they're engulfed in their activities. These are not things that we're forcing them, you need to do this. They're choosing to sit down or stand, whatever they prefer, to really just enjoy the activity, like enjoy what they're learning. This is all them.
Yeah, and I think that was an important thing that we talked about previously, where we were like, one of the things that you would see in like a traditional classroom is you would see stations out and things like that. But the difference is that we are not forcing kids to rotate through or doing what we call population control of the number of kids that can be at a station. So if we recognize, like if Paige recognizes in the chestnut room that there's even more kids who want to be a part of this sunflower thing, the next day she can figure out how to have more ways to interact with that and to have more kids be able to participate in it. And I love this picture down in the corner where you have Bernie holding up her letters that she's written and all the words that she's written out. And I just reminds me of a conversation I just overheard yesterday coming out of I think it was a Chestnut Room parent who was like talking to their kid, and were like, "Did you write all of these words? Like, did you actually write?" And the parent could not believe that the child actually had written the words, and the student was so proud, and a little frustrated that they were having to convince their parent that they actually had written the words.
I defended that kiddo.
Yeah, and which you could tell that they did it because they were passionate about what they learned. So, like, we're not randomly telling kids what words they need to be able to write or what letters they have to form. They are finding a reason to want to write and then asking us how to write it. And that is the type of sticky learning I talked about earlier, that like Bernie remembering how to write habitat she's going to remember that now because it stuck to something that was important to her, and it was a concrete learning experience that meant something to her, as opposed to sitting down working on a workbook for math or doing a spelling list that has no context.
This is exactly how I learned.
Yeah.
I'm like,
so there's so much rich stuff that's happening in these things. So even though our small group time is happening at the same time, the learning that's happening at that exact same time, not involving directly the teacher, is important as well. Should we jump to the curriculum we're looking at?
Yes, please.
Okay, curriculum.
All right, I just kind of want to preface this slide by saying we are still actively researching curriculums. We have kind of like a list of things that we're looking for in them, and these curriculums are kind of fitting the mold of what we're looking at. So we wanted you to see some examples, but the only curriculum that's on this slide that we're 95% sure we'll for sure be moving forward with is the handwriting without tears. That's a very intentional choice because D97 does handwriting without tears. And so we do, if kiddos transition back into D97, we want to make sure that there is some fluidity and familiarity with the language that's being used for handwriting, because that can be a trickier skill for kiddos. So that's why we are choosing handwriting without tears, most likely for that curriculum. But then these other curriculums are just examples, so that way you can see where our brains are kind of while we're researching curriculums. It is important to us that we have curriculums in the program. We'll talk about assessments in the next slide, but this will help hold us accountable and make sure that you can feel assured that your child is going to be ready and moving on to the next stages in their educational career. So this will help create some accountability for our teachers in the program. But we are looking for the Treehouse Nature Study is a curriculum that we're looking at that would go in tandem with our time in Thatcher Woods. And that's also a very science-driven curriculum, which is what we liked about it also. And then the wild math is an example of this is how we're envisioning taking our learning on the go in Thatcher Woods with us. It's helping. There are math concepts, higher level concepts that are driven in the curriculum, but helping the students see you don't have to have just Unifix cubes. It's not that math happens with specific math tools. Math is all around you, and continuing with that concept of learning is on the go and is all around us, and helping their brains be flexible thinkers in that sense. Most students already kind of, like we said, they are curious and they're organic learners, and we're just kind of trying to foster that skill while making sure that we do have some accountability for the skills that we need to teach your kiddos.
Can I just say I didn't even learn what 1/4 was until I started cooking. Like I literally, that's just not
because it meant something.
Yeah,
to
I'm
you.
just not. That's how I learn.
Yeah, that's how you learn. And one of the things that I love about this also is the overlap with Thatcher. You know, that you can see that two of the curriculums that we're investigating are steeped in nature, and the wild math curriculum is a curriculum that we'll be able to bring to the woods with us. So you'll note when we were looking at the flow of the day that we would be missing our small group time during that time. And so the curriculums that we're choosing are curriculums that can be brought into the woods with us that we can continue to use. And then also using that mini lessons to kind of set up what we might be able to see. So if we were to go with like Treehouse, you would see, some of the introductory concepts being explained during that time period on a Tuesday before we went into the woods on a Wednesday. And so that's why we're also looking at this, because not only do we value hands-on experience, but we want kids to have that nature-based education. And so we want that to flow through even when we're indoors, and is really important. And again, that brings that science side that is so that gets kids really excited about learning at this age, to the indoor part of learning as well, that then they can see applied outside during our time in nature when we do that. Should we jump to the next slide?
Mm-hmm.
Monitoring student progress. So when we did our survey, this was a big question, and I know assessments are a are a hot topic for parents of how kids are assessed, and so we want to be able to find, and we do at OPFS even now with our early childhood, find a way to meet parents in the middle and while being also developmentally appropriate. So the district that we're in, D97 for Oak Park, uses the Common Core, as does all of Illinois, as their K to 12 learning standards. And so what we have done at a lower school, meaning our ECE program, birth through 5, is look at the early learning standards and cull them down to the things that we think are the most important standards for early childhood, or take them and combine them when there have been so many different standards that are actually speaking to the same learning goal, so that it does not become overwhelming for teachers as well as for students. And so we imagine that that's exactly what we would do for this program. So there wouldn't be formalized assessments. It would be day-to-day assessments from the teachers and the teacher assistant that would be part of the program, who would be constantly assessing what standards kids are meeting. And it would be holding us accountable to making sure that we're meeting those goals while also being responsive to the learning that we see kids doing in front of us. In order to communicate that to the parents, we would have 2 set aside times for conferences a year. But of course, like Katie talked about, like that community part of the program is so important. And so there would be ongoing communication with you. But these would just be formalized times that we would set aside. And then we'd have a progress monitoring report that would be given twice a year. And whether that would be something our teachers use to make sure that your child is meeting all of the goals that we had set out for kindergarten or for first grade learning, or whether it would be something that we would share with you. It would definitely be the basis of what we feel is even a more important part of the way we monitor kids, which is a anecdotal reflection of your child. And so the way we use it in lower school now is to assess and track and make sure that your kids are meeting the goals that we're setting forth. And then we use that progress report to be the source for the anecdotal writing that we do, because I think hearing from a teacher's words what your child is able to do and how they are flowing through their day is so much more important than it is just looking at a checkbox, which is the way the districts would do that. And again, limited because of bureaucracy to 3 sentences on every report card. So you don't get a good feel for what your child's experience is and where they stand. And so we're hoping that that would be the basis of it. We're still fleshing it out, but that we feel like we would probably mimic what we are doing, just based on the Common Core standards from learning. Anything you guys want to add to that?
I just want to say that this is being developed through literally just because we want your children to succeed. It's not because there's no other, it was literally made from 3, I would say, dreams or hopes. And so really it's not, we just want to see your children, our kids, have a childhood and, succeed. It's like it's purely just
but in a developmentally
Yeah.
appropriate manner. And I think that that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about, has been that, you know, as education has gotten more standardized, you know, formalized education began as a factory model to get workers ready to be able to go into factories and be able to follow the rules and to follow a standard schedule. And it has not changed. The structure of the day has not changed very much. What has changed is the expectations in it. And so even though we know we don't have a workforce that works in factories predominantly now, we still have an education system that tries to create people who work in factories. And so we're trying to find something, in addition to making them even remember more knowledge that they don't necessarily need at that age, you know. So like reading is a perfect example that we talked about. And Katie, you know, with your literacy specialist, you know, background, I know you feel this, but like talking about reading, we don't worry about kids who can't read until they're like 7, because just like walking, you have a continuum of how you learn. You know, some kids walk at 9 months and some kids walk at 15 to 18 months, you know, like same thing with reading. Some kids read at 3 or 4 and some kids read at 7. So why are we so concerned at 5, which is right in the middle of it, that they aren't learning? Now by 7, if we're recognizing that they really are still struggling, then we do need to put extra supports and help them kind of get there. But it's definitely not something. It's a good example of how the teachers are held accountable for a non-developmentally appropriate standard that the districts have kind of placed on them. And that any teacher that's gone through an education knows that it's not developmentally appropriate to force and be worried about that reading, you know, but definitely to continue to introduce and want to expose kids to that, but that they will learn to read, you know, on their time.
I mean, some of these kids were in diapers 2 years ago. Or still, I mean, like, and like, we want them.
Point, right?
And then I would like rather Luna to like, why are you wiping your butt really good? How do you feel? Like emotionally? Are you like okay? Like, why are we like? It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and the research, going off what Talia said too, like there's so much more research available to us now than when the education system started all those years ago.
Exactly.
And there just hasn't been much response and change to what we know. And it's just kind of that silly like line, but when you know better, you do better. And that is lacking. And I feel very strongly about that. And we want to create a space that does respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're fortunate to be able to do that.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Okay. So Q&A. Unfortunately, we won't be able to hear the questions from you, but if you have any questions, feel free to email us at admin, ADMIN, at OPFS, Oak Park Friends School, .org, and we're happy to respond to any of your questions. Some of the things that we did want to point out, do you mind if I take this, or do you guys want to take it? Okay. We will be following a D97 academic calendar. We wanted to do that because we follow that at OPFS for the most part, as well as recognizing if you have older kids, it would make the most sense. We'll have a low student to teacher ratio. So our cap is 20 kids for the K1 program with 2 teachers. And that would still be true for 10 kids. So we would have 10 kids with 2 teachers. Little to no technology. And as I said, you know, this would be more of an exposure. So we wouldn't do a 1-to-1 like they have at D97 ever in our program. But I do think about like Paige, I think about your classroom wanting to understand bees and pollination and things like that. So easy to be able to show a video of that so they can really understand it, since we can't have a microscope to watch the bees do that right now.
Absolutely.
So that is how I imagine technology would be used. No homework, which I'm happy to say many kindergartners are moving towards. 1 teacher and 1 experienced assistant teacher. And so like Katie alluded to, this would be people who are already steeped in the OPFS philosophy. So that part of what we're trying to create would not be an issue, but that the teacher would have a minimum of a bachelor's in education. And then the one experienced assistant teacher would also be somebody from OPFS steeped in this understanding, and more than likely somebody who's also teacher qualified through DCFS, but maybe not fully has completed a bachelor's in education at that time. Tuition would be monthly for 10 months at $14.50, and that would include lunch and snack. And then I know there are a lot of other questions. I'm trying to think from when we did our previous presentation if there's anything we wanted to address. Or any closing remarks that you guys have as we wrap this up.
I want to say something, but we might have to take it out. But I'm just going to say that the school system, my sister works at a school, and they had a speaker come in, and the school system is the one system that replicates a prison system.
It is. No, it is, it is definitely, it's the school to prison pipeline, and they talk about it. And it's one of the reasons, like if you look at many other developing countries, the way their school system and also their prison system they have been able to reform it because they know better. And for some reason in America, either it's just too big, or there are lots of things that have tried to do it, whether it was the insertion of charter schools, which really just mimicked the same. But then there were some really amazing charter schools like out in Arizona and actually in Texas that were like project-based, really developmentally appropriate schools for kids. And I think that that's one thing I feel passionate about, is that there are kids who will do fine in the school system. But the problem is, just like we know as adults, we all learn differently. Yep. So why should there just be one way to experience education when kids learn differently? They need different settings. They need different ways to learn so that we can be true to who they are and help them be the best kids that they're going to be, as opposed to trying to fit them into the box of expectations that come with this elementary education system that we have now.
I wish I had this when I was younger. I feel like I would have excelled. Yeah. Truthfully.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm on the younger end with the parents. I only have a 22-month-old, but I'm quickly learning that childhood is fleeting and it's a short time in their life. And we kind of alluded to this zero depth pool versus being thrown into the deep end. And these kiddos are still 5 and 6 and 7. They're still, they're doing amazing things that they're capable of doing, but we just want to honor where they are in their season of life and that they're children, and protect that magic for them a little bit longer. And that is a huge part of where this came from, because Paige and I both as teachers here, but also having our children enrolled here, we've seen the magic of giving them that freedom, and we just want to be able to keep them in that little bubble a couple years longer, and they need it still. This is where they are from a developmentally appropriate perspective. And that's just truly our hearts in all of this too.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. If this has intrigued you at all, enrollment is open at the link that you see on this slide here. We'll have classroom previews in April, and there will be some more in-person information sessions if you're interested in seeing this same show in person. And if you have questions, I'll just reiterate, feel free to email us on our admin@opfs.org. And we will hope to hear from you. Thanks so much for spending the time with us, and we look forward to seeing your kiddos.
Thank you.
Thanks.